Let me take you back to the last week of 7th grade. Like I'm sure we've all done and do, the conversation went from school to our clothes to how we looked. And of course, you were all complaining. But then I heard the words that I'll never forget. Hey, Samaira, you know you could just stop eating if you wanted to be thinner, right? Fast forward 6 months. It was a friend's house party. The weighing scale was just lying there. We all took turns standing on it, and it felt like my heart dropped in its chest. 3 months later, someone said, "Hey, move," followed by an insult to my weight. I stopped eating after school, and then breakfast, and then lunch, and alas, the morsels I ate for dinner too went away. I made a promise to myself that I would get to this goal weight. Each step I took didn't seem significant enough until one day they all did. I quickly reached that target. But then I thought, why not push myself more? Why not keep going? So meet Edward. As a sense of control overtook me, I loved it. And Edward here loved it even more. We both thrived in doing all those little calculations in my head. If my grades didn't go great, if I fought with a parent or a friend, I turned to him for comfort, and he never failed me. It became how I coped, because the more I controlled, the less I ate, and the happier I felt. And that was a happiness that no one could really take away from me. I kept convincing myself that what I was doing was safe, healthy, for the greater good. But in reality, it was all just a slippery slope. The line between what we think we're doing to stay healthy and when it actually becomes harmful is so blurry that I didn't even realize it when my pursuit of perfection simply warped into chaos. I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa 4 years ago. Anorexia nervosa is one of the deadliest mental disorders. This eating disorder causes around one death every 52 minutes, which equates to 10,200 deaths yearly, with over 20% of all victims remaining chronically ill. Eating disorders often tend to result from a combination of biological, social, and psychological factors. These can include family history, puberty, low self-esteem, culture, trauma, and more. Specifically, perfectionism has been identified as an important influence, as perfectionists tend to place immense pressure on themselves to meet unrealistic standards regarding their appearance. This can include body shape, type, or weight. Managing perfectionism can thus be crucial in preventing and treating EDs, as people with perfectionistic strivings are significantly more likely to develop an eating disorder, according to a meta-analysis done with over 95 studies and 32,840 participants. For me, my perfectionism manifested to the high standards and unrealistic expectations I set for myself. To manage my fears of making mistakes, self-doubt, and stress, I turned to my disorder. Studies suggest that many people with EDs feel a lack of control in other aspects of their lives, resulting in them turning to their disorders to seek a distorted sense of control through compensatory behaviors. These can include restrictive eating, purging, or excessive exercise. This then gives them a sense of temporary happiness. So, when faced with any kind of distressing feelings, let's call them triggers, they resort to this vicious cycle to cope, never truly escaping from it. But then, I reached a point where it was out of my hands. Even after wanting to maintain, I would lose kilograms and kilograms, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. And that's when I realized Edward had finally become stronger than me. The day I admitted, Mom, Dad, I can't do it myself, and that I need help, was the day my life changed. I was taken in and immediately rushed to the ER because the doctors told me that my heart rate was so dangerously low that my life was in danger. Malnutrition usually causes the heart muscle to shrink and the heart rate to slow to below 60 beats per minute. That is a medical condition known as bradycardia, often associated with anorexics and other ED patients. I was immediately put on the refeeding process. Now, as the name suggests, this meant giving my body the food it so desperately needed. However, going from eating half an egg a day to the amount the hospital fed me, I faced severe gastrointestinal issues, which meant acute stomach pain for days. And that is just one of the multiple complications that can arise from the recovery process, all collectively known as the refeeding syndrome. One of the biggest worries is that the reduced mass of the heart after starvation makes it intensely difficult for the heart to handle the increase in total blood volume seen with the increased food intake. In other words, this means that recovery too can lead to heart failure. So even if by some miracle I mentally convinced myself to eat, my body itself would reject the food, and that's exactly how difficult recovery was. To prevent any such complications from becoming life-threatening, I had to have around-the-clock care. This meant daily blood tests, being hooked to a heart monitor 24/7, and slowly increasing my food intake. The doctors were so afraid to the point where the nurses were asked to wheelchair me to the toilet and back, afraid that I would collapse. And even then, it took me eating more than 3,500 calories a day and 3 months of staying at home and being not allowed to exercise to finally reach to a healthy weight. That is unfortunately the harsh reality for all severe cases of EDs. The reason why this entire process, refeeding, is so essential is because without it, no psychotherapy will have any effect. Malnutrition usually leads to brain atrophy, which is defined as a reduction in the volume of brain matter. MRI show that anorexics in specific commonly have decreased gray and white matter. These changes can impair one's decision-making, one's memory, the way one experiences, processes, and responds to emotions. And that is exactly why patients who fall below critical weight require external intervention to get better, because their altered brain function alone makes it impossible for them to make healthy decisions regarding their recovery. The scariest part of it all, these changes, they can even be irreversible depending on the extent of the disease. After the hospital, I was immediately put on MODSI family-based therapy. Now, MODSI FBT is one of the most effective approach for youth with anorexia, with one of the highest remission rates of 50%. This outpatient approach is one where the parents have an active role in recovery. As my FBT therapist liked to put it, her job was supporting my parents to support me. She taught my parents how to manage me, how to take control from me, and how to tackle my list of fear foods, which was a list usually made by the patient at the start of recovery of the foods they were scared of eating. This kind of therapy consists of 3 phases: weight restoration, returning control to the adolescent, and establishing a healthy identity, which I completed about 2 years ago. But I do have to say, the hardest part of my entire recovery was inarguably the weight restoration, because each time I tried accepting how my body looked, it changed, and it kept changing. Relapses are the sad norm for ED patients, and that means there were many a time where I lost weight and had to go back through this entire ordeal. Every day was a big challenge for me, faced with new foods and Edward's voice echoing in my head that I didn't deserve to eat. And that's without even mentioning my parents. I can't imagine it was easy seeing their own child thinking, well, they weren't good enough to eat. And I think that's one of the reasons this disease is considered one of the deadliest, because of the impact it has on not only the patient, but on their loved ones as well. But now, I've been going to therapy for 4 years, and I've realized that after the initial recovery phase, my weight was no longer an issue for me. And yet my parents insisted that I keep going to therapy. I never really understood why, until one day I asked my therapist. He explained to me that my eating disorder was never just about food. For most people, it isn't. And I think that's one thing that everyone gets wrong. I mean, I got it wrong too. An eating disorder, it's not a cause, it's an effect. A study conducted by the National Eating Disorder Association in 2022 found that a shocking 94% of hospitalized ED patients had a co-occurring mental health disorder. This means when I go to therapy now, we don't talk about my disorder. We talk about my self-respect, my esteem, my self-esteem, and we work on my relationships with people. Sure, my disorder sometimes tends to weave its way into our conversations, but my conversations never revolve around it. Most people tend to think, hey, why don't you just eat Samaira? What's the big deal? They think all you care about is being pretty and thin, and that is such a vain and shallow perspective of yourself and of life. But what they don't understand is that you don't choose to care this much about how you look. You don't choose your ED. Your ED chooses you. I remember when I first got hospitalized, my doctor told me that I don't know what is right or what is wrong. I only know what Edward wants, and I can't separate his voice from my own. Because at the time, the only thing I could think about was my disorder. It made me irritated and annoyed at simply everything, and I would cry for hours on end. And I now realize I may have been thin back then, but that was no pretty version of myself. Therapy, more than anything, has taught me how to differentiate between Edward's voice and my own, learning to recognize when Edward is saying no to food and when I am, consequently teaching me when to fight with that voice in my head. However, I do want to be honest with you all. I didn't want to give this speech. Not at all, not one bit. I was afraid of what people would think of me. They would only think of me as the eating disorder girl. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized perhaps that isn't all for the worse. When I was younger and I heard that someone older than me had talked about having gone through something similar publicly, to be honest, I don't know if I ever would have approached her, but at least I'd have the option, knowing that I wasn't alone. And I think that would have made all the difference in my recovery then. And even now, getting out of the hospital might have been a big step for me. Eating my first ice cream after years might have been another. But this, right here today, being able to talk to you all and tell you all about my journey, marks another significant milestone in my recovery. Nonetheless, I know I'm not fully recovered. Only 46% of all anorexics ever fully recover. I don't think I'll ever forget about these thoughts and these behaviors. However, I do know I've come to a point where I can manage my disorder myself. Perhaps this is full recovery, where a small part of me has to battle with that voice in my head every single day. Perhaps full recovery means breaking the link between thought and action, having the thoughts, but knowing not to act upon them. I don't think recovery is forgetting. After all, Edward, he has become a part of me now. My identity, my lifestyle, the choices I make every single day. Perhaps recovery means stripping him of his power to harm me and instead only help me. Edward has given me a lot of things in my life. He has tested a lot of my relationships and he has taught me a lot of lessons. But I think one of the biggest things he has given me is the ability to help other people. I made a film called When Sally Gets Old, documenting my own experience with anorexia. It was then selected to be screened at Singapore's International Children's Film Festival, where multiple parents and children were able to talk to me and ask me about my journey. Who knows? Perhaps that day, a mother or a child recognized something and took a step towards getting help. What I do know is this: none of that would have been possible without Edward in my life. It has taken me a long, long time to realize that Edward could be positive, but only if I let him. I know some people take decades to realize that, and some people don't ever. And that's why I know recovery, just like getting sick, in itself is a spectrum. Because it's a continuum, there's no one clear-cut definition of being recovered. And that just means there's no one straight path to recovery, because recovery looks different, is different for each individual. And I think that thought, it extends to beyond my disorder. Recovery, in its truest form, is something we all have to undergo, whether it be from loss, heartbreak, betrayal, physical illness, or something else entirely. Truth is, 100% of us, every single one of us here, has, is, or will go through something so deeply scarring that it changes them forever, changes their outlook on life forever, something they'll never fully forget. Because it etches itself into memory like a burn, perhaps fading with time, but never truly disappearing. And I don't think recovery is about erasing that pain. I think it's about learning to carry it with grace. It's about taking that heaviness, processing it, accepting it, and learning from it, to let it shape you and not break you. Because that's exactly how growth happens. And that's exactly where healing begins. Thank you.